So as we can see, here's one I made earlier, a pre-made sub-patch, just to try and make sense of what's happening. We've got 4 inlets and we've got 4 outlets. Now the whole purpose of this is so when pressure is applied to the sensor pad, it triggers the note on. When pressure is released, it triggers the note off. If you didn't use this sub patch and you went straight to the instrument or the MIDI note, it would consistently trigger a bang, and obviously we don't want that because we have a latch instrument that just requires 1 bang for on, 1 bang for off. So to make sense of this, what's happening is on the first inlet we're going into a flow num just to give us a visual representation of what's happening. And that's being multiplied by 100. Okay, so multiplying that by 100 enables us to split the number so that it will only output a bang when it sees between 0 and 10. That will then get sent to 1 bang, which then gets sent to a visual representation of that bang. Okay, you don't have to create that, that's just so you can make sense of what's happening. That bang then gets sent to outlet 4. Okay, so when that bang happens, it sends out a bang to outlet 4. Now with outlet 4, which is back on our patcher, that has to then go back in. Oh, excuse me, I haven't created the patch yet, sorry. Okay, ignore that. So that goes to outlet 4, which will then be sent to the MIDI note in order to trigger it, in order to stop and unlatch the note. So that has to come second. Okay, so going back to our multiply by 100, that goes to another split, which is 20 to 99. So you can see what's happening. We've got 2 splits. We've got 20 to 99, 0 to 10. So 0 to 10 is when pressure is released because it's stable at 0. And 20 to 99 is when pressure is being applied. So any number between 20 and 99, it'll just output the bangs. But we only want 1 bang. So we need to split that. So it will output the bang. There's a visual representation of what's happening there. On the left hand side, it will output into a 1 bang. And on the right hand side, it will output into another bang. So basically with the split, on the left hand side, it will output the bangs when it sees the numbers between 20 and 99. On the right hand side, it will output a bang when it sees the number below 20 or above 99. Well, that's not the case in this because it only goes up to 99. So on the left hand side, it's before 20. So on the left hand side, sorry, it's between 20 and 99 within limits. Yeah. So that has to go to a 1 bang. So on the left hand side of the 1 bang, it will only the first bang gets through, which will then get sent to a bang, which then gets sent to the outlet number 3, which is then sent into our MIDI note so that it will trigger the MIDI note. It will send out the bang. So that's how that one's working. Now what we have over here is we have the less than 1 to the gate. So how that gate's working is it will only allow the bang through once the gate is opened, and then once the gate's closed, it won't allow the bang to go through. So to determine when the gate opens, we have to attach onto the right inlet the bang from inlet 2, and on the left inlet we have to attach the toggle, which is being switched on by the bang, which is being activated when it goes between 0 and 10. So you can start to understand why we've created this. Excuse me. We're trying to create it so that we have just 1 bang for on, 1 bang for off. So if we go back into our patcher, and we'll come back to that in a second. So what we need to create is we need the number from the value, from the pad, from the analog, into number 1 and 2 inlet on the patcher. Then we need the outlet number 1 to go into a 0 message. So I'm going to create a message of 0. Come back to that, and then select 1 needs to come out of outlet 2, and then that needs to go into the bang, the message, sorry, of 0. Then right and left will just be used as a toggle, so we're going to create a toggle. So that's just to switch it on, switch it on. That's just purely for the presentation. So we make that big, and we can make that color red, and then on the picture we can put the toggle, so that when it's activated it will see the toggle itself. Okay, so with the patcher we need to create a toggle again. Put that up here, and then place that into the last inlet, so that switches on. We go back into there, the first toggle. Okay, now if these two toggles are switched off, the first one, the top one, has to be switched on. Now the reason for this is because when that outputs a bang and that toggle is switched off, it will close the gate. That needs to be able to switch it off so that it goes into the gate and activates the gate, if that makes sense. So by banging that, as we can see, both toggles are turned on. Bang it, both toggles are turned off. If we have one on, we bang it, it will just swap to the other toggle. So that one will switch off and that one will switch on. So that enables us to close and open the gates. As you can see, they're both lined up to the gate, so that means that the gate's closed and that means that the gate is open. So that just enables us to switch it on and off without going into the sub patch. Now with the last one we have a 160 message, so there's a message of 160 which has to be plugged into number 3. So if we go back into the patch, now 160, if we click that, will come up here. This is a delay. Now the reason for this delay is we have to have a delay on the toggle, otherwise it won't output the bang quick enough in order to turn it off. Because, okay, so the output value from the toggle, from the trigger pads, the sensor pads, are constantly outputting bangs every second. If we then apply pressure, it's going to output a bang. But if we apply pressure within that second and then depress the pad, it may not send out the bang because we may not be quick enough. Also, if we then apply pressure and it outputs a bang, if we don't add the delay, it will output another bang before it's activated. So by adding the delay of 160, it seems to be the optimal time to enable that to stop fluttering and sending out more than one bang. Because if it sends out more than one bang, it's obviously going to switch the instrument off because we've got it set up in here. I hope that makes some sense of what's happening in here. I apologise if I haven't explained it correctly to its full potential, but that's the idea. It's enabled us to have one bang when pressure is applied and one bang when it's depressed. Okay, so that's our little mini patcher. So from the 0, so this is our 0 notes to determine what goes into our table store. So this table store was created by Alex Dudley, a fellow peer student of mine. So bear in 1 second, I'm just trying to load that in. Okay. Table. Okay, so this can be downloaded from the instruction manual. So let me just load that up. So this is an object created by Alex Dudley. Table store maxpat, load that in, just drag that in. It should, there we go, so we've got that then. Okay, so there's our patch. We select 0 to go into the left inlet, and then we need to create another sub patch. And within this sub patch, we need to have our UDP receive. So if I create UDP receive, and we're going to use port 9001, then we need to have a root, then master, then time, then master, then scale, and that's going to be scale 2. So that's the information coming from the main clock PC. So then I'm going to create a number. So we're going to there, and then we're going to create 2 outlets. And the number is going to go into outlet 2, and outlet 1 is going to have, oh, I apologize, that hasn't created. Here we go. There needs to be a space in between time and master. I apologize. In order for that to work. Yes. So then outlet 2 has to go into outlet 1. And then from this patcher, we need to go from outlet 1 only. So that's determining the note. So from outlet 1 into table store on the right. So then if we go into table store, that's going from pack scale data. So what's happening in here, pack scale data is unpacking the notes, displaying the notes, and then putting them into table notes, which then gives us our MIDI note. Now with index on the left hand side, that's determining which one of these notes to pick. So with this one, for example, this analog input, we've got 0. For this analog input, we'd need to put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 respectively, so it picks note 1, note 2, note 3, note 4, etc, etc. Okay, so hope you're still with me. I apologise if I've made this a little bit confusing, but there is the patch for you to download within the Instructables website if you are getting stuck. So what we need to now do is go from table store into a piano roll. No, sorry, we're not going to use the piano roll. We're going to go into beep, and we're going to have a piano roll sequencer. No, that's not the one. I do apologize. I forget if it's a Visual or a beep instrument. It's okay, I seem to want to load it. Bear with me 2 seconds. So that's what we need to get. Okay, so the quickest method of finding this is we create a K slider, and that will create our piano roll. Now, if you're using the BLOX as a standalone, we'll need to add a multiply 48 in front. The reason for that is because of the notes that come natively out of the blocks and out of our table will be too low to make a MIDI note that's audible. So we need to plus 48 in order to push it up to middle C. Obviously we can take that off, and it all depends on within this table what notes we're using. If we're using notes of like 50 and 40, then obviously we don't need to worry about adding the multiply there. So that goes into the payout. Now what we can also add into this is the velocity. So going back to our slider, simply attach the slider to the velocity, and that will have the amount of velocity that's being applied to that MIDI note. Now from the piano, piano roll, the K slider in this case. We can go into make notes. So now we're starting to transform into a MIDI note. 60 4N, and then push that in. So on the left inlet we've got pitch, on the middle inlet we've got velocity, and then we need join to join those two together into one bit of information, into one message of information. And on the right side we've got velocity, so let's go to join. I'll join the two together, and then we need to go to MIDI formats because we need to turn that into a MIDI. Oops. Okay, and then just the left inlet from join, and then the right inlet can go into our instruments. So we're going to use the polydrone instruments. Okay, doesn't want to find it. So, polyphonic drone, there we go. From MIDI into there, and there we have it. So as we select through here, it's going to have us select the note through there. If you want to use a VST instrument, you'll need to create a ZL group. Free. And then pre-penned MIDI event. Go from the ZL group into the pre-penned MIDI event. From there, from MIDI format, and then from here you can attach that to a VST instrument. But we don't need that if we're using the polyphonic drone, so we'll just stick that over there. Now, from the polyphonic drone, we can do all sorts of things. So first of all, we want to create a reverb unit. So let's create reverb 1. So I believe that might be a visual, or it might just be a standards plugin for there we go. Simulation of reverb, plate reverb. So we want reverb 1. Use that. So it was a beep instrument. So we're going from the signal of the drone into the input of the reverb. Then from the reverb we're going to go into the gain control. And then from the gain control we're going to go into a audio output. So if we add the object, go to audio, we can create the audio outputs, and then that just simply goes into the audio. We don't need to be in stereo for this. Okay, so the reason why I've created that reverb is now we can also use the velocity or the pressure from the slider, so that's from our force sensor pads, to control the time. So a simple way of doing that, multiply by 99 point, into time, left inlet into the output of the slider, and that will control, should however control our time. Sorry, yes, I know what I've done wrong. Right then, so we need to do a little bit of reconfiguration here. Go into the B patcher of reverb, go off presentation mode and into edit mode. Now the second inlet, you need to deactivate that and attach it to time. If you don't do that, it won't alter it. So now, yes, there we go, it works. Okay, so by doing that we can just reconfigure it slightly. So there we go, so that the velocity of that will now change the time of the reverb. So what we need to now do is do exactly the same up until the point of the make note for each of the ins of the analog, so each of the sensors. So if we just take the piano, we take the table store, take the toggle, take the the patcher, select, and the numbers, and just copy, paste over, and we attach, let's say, number 6, and then from the piano roll, or key slider, excuse me, to make notes, and then the same from the velocity, so that's the right outlet into make notes, and there we go. So you do the same again across all of the other analog ins. Once you've got one working, it's a simple case of copying and pasting across the others. Okay, so now we need to move on to our, what I call the cork slider. Okay, so bear with me 2 seconds. We need to move over to the cork slider. So with our cork slider, the potentiometer, we can use that to change the value of pretty much a whole range of different parameters. So let's say we've got analog 6. Okay, in the original patch, it's actually analog 1. So let's use analog 1 actually to avoid any confusion. It's just how you wire it up. You can plug it into 6, 1, as long as you've got the patch right, should be okay. So we need to go from analog 1, and from there we need to go into a flow num. Okay, and then from that flow num we need to create a new patcher. Now I'm just going to copy the patcher that I made earlier just to save a little bit of time, but I'll show you how it was done. So we go to the patcher, go from the flow num into each of the inlets, so it needs to be from inlet 1 all the way through to the final inlet. Now I have been advised there is an easier method of doing this, and the easier method of doing this would be to use $sign to convert the number into the message. I haven't actually experimented with that yet, so for now, for the purpose of this presentation, I will show you the original method of doing it. Now if we just explore inside here, what we've got here is splits. So it's going to read the number. So if I just create one, so if I say create an inlet, then go into a split, then from that split go into a message, and I want message 2 and then a number, from the left into the number, and then into an outlet, into there. So what's happening here? So with this split I need to create a number between, let's say, 0.09 and 0.10. So what's that, just 10? 10. Okay, so what that actually is doing is when it reads the output value, as I turn it up, when the split sees between 0.09 and 0.1, it will output a bang to the message 2 space 0.1. Now, what that's telling our parameter, well, what that's telling our plugin is which parameter to assign the message to. So if we create a plugin, and let's use a delay for example, sample delay. So by creating a connection between each of the outlets of the patcher into the delay, we can see that usually there are more than one parameter. In this case there's only one parameter, but usually there are more, so they're numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, etc, etc. So to control number 1, I need to go back into my patcher and change the first number to 1. So by changing the first number to 1, it tells the delay that number 1 needs to be at whichever value you've set it. So this means that when the split is between 0.09 and 0.1, it will send a bang to a message, which will then be sent to the delay, which indicates parameter 1 at 0.1. So it's like a step change rather than a sweep. Then simply send that to your output and you're good to go. Now it might be advisable to put a gain slider in between the two so that you can control how much of the delay is going into your output. Now you can really be experimental with this. You can do all sorts of things. You can assign it to reverb, you can assign it to a filter, you can assign it to velocity, you can assign it as a chaotic, for example. You can set it to random, so you don't know what it's going to be assigned to until you start to move it. There are so many different possibilities of starting that up. So one last thing is your kill switch. So to make a kill switch for this, we want a toggle. We want a bang. Oh yeah, you can't do that on Max 7. Still haven't worked out how to do that. Where's bang? We go into there. Trigger. Okay. Then with the toggle, we need to add DAC tilde. Yep. So then that will switch on and off the audio. So by attaching a bang to that, we can then switch on and switch off. And then with this bang, we can put it in presentation mode, so that while we're in presentation mode, we can just use it as a kill switch. We can just go kill and then hit it, and then it just turns everything off, and you're free to explore the patch if there's any debugging issues. Now, of course, to create a visual representation, all we have to do is find our image. So, for example, I'm using this image here. It's called 4patch. Drag that in. There's my image. Then the toggle that we made earlier that just signifies whether the note is on or off can just be laid over the area of the image that we wanted to represent. And obviously if we add that to presentation mode, we can see it in presentation mode. Now for the purpose of this patch, I just used inspector, change the color, so the background color is opaque, the unchecked color is opaque, and then the checked color is red, to just to differentiate between each section of the blocks. And that's pretty much it. So that gives you a quick rundown on how to build the patch. Obviously this isn't complete. You can, from this point on, it's mainly just copy and pasting. So it's copy and pasting this section, duplicating it across each of the analog ins, and then it's a simple case of just trying it out and experimenting, really. The most awkward patch to get your head around is, of course, our first major sub-patch, which is to determine whether the note is on or off. But I hope that you can get some understanding on how this is working. It's essentially seeing between 0 and 10 when the trigger is depressed, sending out a bang, and then when it reads between 20 and 99, it will send out a bang to say that the note is on. And then through one bang and through gates, we can stop multiple bangs from being sent out. Okay, so that concludes my rundown and look into the patch for the blocks. If you have any further questions, please feel free to email me with the email provided within the instructions. I've been James Prosser. Thank you very much.